Hello there, this is Dr. Kingston, and in this video we're going to be going over the thyroid and parathyroid glands. For each of these glands, we're going to look at the structures that make them up, we're going to look at the hormones they produce, and we're going to talk about how they're regulated. So the thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland, and actually thyroid means shield-shaped in Latin, but I think butterfly is a little bit more accurate here. And it is found here in the midline of the neck, okay, just inferior to the larynx, which actually has a very nicely shield-shaped thyroid cartilage here. All right, it has two large lobes, so one on the right, one on the left, and these are connected in the midline by this isthmus here, which sits anterior to the trachea. There is also potentially a third pyramidal lobe that sticks up in the middle here, and this is variably present from person to person. It's supplied by branches of both the external carotid artery and the subclavian artery. So the external carotid, so here would be our common carotid, and then as it comes up into the neck here, it splits into external carotid and internal carotid. The external carotid is going to give off the superior thyroid artery, which comes down to the gland from above. And from the subclavian artery here, we have a little branch called the thyrocervical trunk, and that is going to give off the inferior thyroid artery. You get a better view of this when we look at it posteriorly, okay? So we see we've got one coming down from the top and one coming up from the bottom. Likewise, it is drained by two different veins as well. So we have drainage coming via the internal jugular vein. Okay, that's our big vein here in the neck. And that is going to collect the superior thyroid vein and the middle thyroid vein. It also drains down to the left brachiocephalic vein, which is here. So here's the superior vena cava, here's left brachiocephalic, right brachiocephalic. And this is going to collect the inferior thyroid vein. So note that there are right and left for superior and middle, but really just one inferior thyroid vein. All right, and here I am posing the question to you, why do we have such a rich arterial and venous supply for such a small little gland here? All right. It is because this is how the hormones produced by these glands are going to be shared throughout the body. So the thyroid gland is going to secrete its hormones out. Those get picked up by usually the veins here and carried into systemic circulation for distribution around the body that way. Right, the thyroid actually produces and secretes a handful of different hormones, and they each have different cells that are responsible for making them. So let's start off with the follicular cells here in blue. The follicular cells surround thyroid follicles, which are these big fluid-filled spaces here. Okay, I'm going to just circle that there. So the cells that are surrounding these are the follicular cells, and these are what secrete what we normally think of as thyroid hormones. Okay, so T3 and T4. The only real difference between T3 and T4 is how many iodine atoms they have attached. T3 has 3, T4 has 4. That's all you need to know about them. And these are going to act on pretty much every cell in the body. They regulate metabolism, meaning that when there is more of these hormones, it turns up the heat in your body. It makes your cells burn energy faster. The other hormone secreted here is calcitonin, and that is secreted by the parafollicular cells. Let's see if I can't get my circles to come up. There we go. So where we had follicular cells surrounding these fluid-filled follicles, the parafollicular cells tend to cluster in between them. So here we've got big, dense pockets of parafollicular cells. So these are making calcitonin, and calcitonin's function is to decrease blood calcium levels. And it does this by telling your bones, the osteoclasts in your bones, that they are not allowed to break down anymore. And it tells your kidneys to stop reabsorbing calcium during filtration. All right, of these, thyroid hormone is the one that is regulated through that hypothalamus anterior pituitary pathway. So we're going to walk through the production of these and talk about how they are regulated here. All right, so our first step in this process is our neurosecretory cells up here in the hypothalamus. These are going to secrete thyrotropin releasing hormone. Releasing hormones always target your anterior pituitary, so that's going to travel through this hypophyseal portal system to the anterior pituitary gland, and that is going to release thyroid stimulating hormone, and that gets pumped out through the blood supply to our thyroid gland. In the thyroid gland, the follicular cells are going to release T3 and T4, and those are sent out to different tissues in the body, okay? And like I said, they are regulating how fast they're burning energy. At the same time they are talking to the other cells in your body, they are also talking back up to your hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. So both of these have receptors that when there is enough T3 and T4 floating around, it will shut off production of thyrotropin releasing hormone and TSH here. Okay, so they not only have the function of affecting metabolism, they will also turn off those releasing factors and the stimulating factors. Now, before we walk through how calcitonin production is regulated, I want to take a quick little detour, and it'll be clear pretty quickly why I want to. So we're going to talk about the parathyroid glands. So in this image here, ooh, so pretty, the thyroid gland has been opened up like a book, so cut down the middle and kind of pushed out to the side. And this lets us see its deep surface, and on that deep surface we can see some parathyroid glands embedded in its posterior. So this is the typical location for parathyroid glands. These are not typical sides for parathyroid glands. These are very, very large. They're usually much smaller. But because this is the typical, that means they're not always here. Sometimes they sit higher or lower in the neck, and occasionally they make their way down into the thorax. They're a little bit weird. But when they are in the thyroid here like this, like they usually are, they're going to share the same blood supply. Okay, so that secretion pathway is very similar. All right, so while they are spatially related to the thyroid gland, they're only partially functionally related. They're not regulated at all by the hypothalamus and pituitary, so they have their own sensors and governing system. They're not related to metabolism, but they do work with those parafollicular cells to regulate the amount of calcium in the blood. So these guys are going to produce parathyroid hormone, which acts to increase blood calcium levels by doing kind of the opposite of calcitonin. So let's take a little bit closer look at how they work together. All right, so let's use this image here to represent homeostasis. We've got our red blood cells, and then we've got some little yellow calcium crystals floating around in here. Now, let's see what happens when we have too large of a concentration of calcium in the blood. All right, in this case, the thyroid gland is going to produce calcitonin, and that calcitonin is going to stop osteoclasts in the bone from releasing calcium salts, and it's going to tell the kidneys to stop reabsorbing calcium while they're filtering the blood and start excreting it instead. And eventually, that's going to bring us back to homeostasis. All right, so now let's look at the opposite side of the loop here. What happens when we have too little calcium in the blood? Well, in this case, the parathyroids are going to pick up on this, and they will release parathyroid hormone. And that will tell those osteoclasts to start breaking down that bone and releasing calcium into the bloodstream. And it also tells the kidneys to produce more vitamin D, which leads to more calcium absorption in the gut. Okay? And that will once again bring us back to homeostasis. All right. So these loops I just showed you, would you say these are examples of positive or negative feedback loops? All right, these are both negative feedback loops. Again, negative feedback loops are the most common type of feedback loop in hormone regulation. So here is the whole cycle. Um, and in each case, the responses of the endocrine system are in the opposite direction of the stimulus. So when there was too much calcium in the blood here, calcitonin was released to bring that level back down. When there was too little, parathyroid hormone was released to bring it back up. Okay, so opposite stimulus and response. All right, and that is all I have for you on the thyroid and parathyroid glands. I will see you next time.